Robert Duvall was sitting in a car outside a children's hospital when he saw something through the window of a second-floor room that made him tell his driver to stop. He walked in without calling ahead, without a publicist, and without a plan. What happened next, nobody in that building ever forgot. It was a Thursday afternoon in October 1992, and Robert Duvall was in Nashville, Tennessee, for a single day, a location scout for a project he was considering that would shoot partly in the area. The day had gone longer than expected, the way days in production always do, and by 4 in the afternoon the work was done, and his driver was navigating back toward the hotel through a part of the city Duvall didn't know. He had spent the morning at a working ranch outside the city, and the afternoon walking a stretch of highway that the location manager thought could double for something the script required. It had been a good day in the practical, low-key way that location scouts are good days. Useful work, honest assessment, no decisions yet made, but several possibilities now real in a way they hadn't been before. They were moving along Medical Center Drive, past the kind of institutional buildings that line hospital districts in every American city, beige and functional, designed for purpose rather than beauty, when they passed the front entrance of Vanderbilt Children's Hospital. Duvall had been looking out the window at nothing in particular. Then he saw the boy, second floor, third window from the left, a child of perhaps 8 or 9, sitting upright in a hospital bed facing the glass, watching the street below with the particular quality of attention that belongs to people who have spent a long time in rooms they cannot leave. He wasn't waving at passing cars or pressing his face against the glass the way children sometimes do. He was simply watching, with the careful, patient, slightly distant focus of someone who has learned to make the world outside a window sufficient entertainment for hours at a time, and who has had enough hours of practice to be genuinely good at it. Duvall watched him for the 3 seconds it took the car to pass the window. Then he said, "Pull over." His driver, a Nashville local named Gerald, who had been hired for the day through the production office and who had not expected his Thursday to develop any particular character, pulled over. Duvall got out of the car. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment and looked up at the second floor. The window was empty now. The boy had shifted position or turned away or simply become invisible against the interior light. Duvall looked at the hospital entrance for a moment, the way a man looks at a door he has already decided to go through. Then he walked through it. The woman at the front desk was named Carol Simmons, and she had worked pediatric admissions at Vanderbilt Children's for 11 years, which meant she had seen most of what a hospital lobby could produce. She had not seen this particular thing before. "Can I help you?" she said. "I'd like to visit one of your patients," Duvall said. "Second floor, third window from the street side." Carol Simmons looked at him for a moment with the professional composure of someone deciding how to respond to a situation that has no established category. "Are you family?" she asked. "No," Duvall said. "Do you know the patient?" "No," Duvall said again. He paused. "I saw him from the car. He was looking out the window." He said this in the straightforward way of a man reporting a fact, without apparent awareness that it was not a standard explanation for a hospital visit. "I thought I'd come in and say hello." Carol Simmons looked at him for another long moment. Then she picked up her phone and called the charge nurse on the second floor. The boy's name was Thomas Arden. He was 9 years old, from a small town called Carthage, about 50 miles east of Nashville, and he had been at Vanderbilt Children's for 19 days following a severe respiratory complication that had required 2 surgeries. He was past the worst of it by that Thursday in October. The doctors had told his parents 3 days earlier that he was going to be fine, that they were looking at another week or 10 days of recovery, and then he could go home. This was genuinely good news, and his parents, David and Susan Arden, received it with the particular relief of people who have been quietly terrified for 3 weeks and are only just beginning to let themselves believe the fear has an end. Thomas, however, was 9 years old and had been in a hospital bed for 19 days, and the knowledge that he was getting better did not make the room larger or the hours shorter. He had read every book his parents had brought him. He had watched more television than he normally watched in a month. He had been visited by his grandparents, his 2 best friends from school, his teacher, and the family's pastor. These visits had been good. The long hours between them had been something else entirely. By the second week, Thomas had developed a relationship with the hospital environment that was part resignation and part adaptation, the specific kind of accommodation that happens when a person stops fighting a circumstance and starts finding ways to live inside it. He knew the names of every nurse on the day shift. He knew which of the orderlies would stop and talk and which were too busy. He knew that the intersection outside his window was busiest between 7:30 and 8:15 in the morning and quietest between 2 and 3 in the afternoon, and that this quietness was not empty but had its own quality that was different from the morning quietness, and he had spent time thinking about why. He was looking out the window at the intersection below when the charge nurse, Patricia Webb, knocked on his room door and leaned in with an expression Thomas could not immediately categorize. "Thomas," she said, "there's someone here who'd like to meet you." Thomas looked at the door. Robert Duvall was 61 years old, lean and unhurried, with short silver-white hair neatly combed and pale blue eyes that held the particular quality of someone who is looking at you with genuine interest rather than professional courtesy. He stood approximately 5'9", with the still, self-contained posture of a man who has long since stopped needing to fill a room with anything other than his actual presence. He was wearing a plain dark jacket over a collared shirt, no tie. He looked, to Thomas Arden, like someone's grandfather, the specific kind of grandfather who has done interesting things and doesn't particularly feel the need to tell you about them. "Hey there," Duvall said from the doorway. "Mind if I come in for a few minutes?" Thomas looked at his mother, who was sitting in the chair beside his bed with an expression he couldn't read. Susan Arden had recognized Robert Duvall approximately 30 seconds after he appeared in the doorway, when something about the angle of his face in the afternoon light matched a memory she couldn't immediately locate, and then could. She had said nothing, because it seemed, in the specific, quiet atmosphere of that room, like exactly the wrong thing to introduce. "Sure," Thomas said. Duvall pulled the visitor's chair to the other side of the bed and sat down. He looked around the room the way he looked at most things, unhurried, genuinely interested, filing what he saw. The Get Well cards taped in a row along the window frame. The stack of library books on the nightstand with a bookmark 3/4 of the way through the top one. The small television mounted on the wall, currently off. The view of Medical Center Drive through the glass, and the pigeons gathered on the ledge of the building directly across the street. "You had a good spot for watching the street," he said. Thomas looked at him. "You saw me?" "From the car. You were paying attention to things." He said this without condescension, as a simple observation about something he had noticed and considered worth noting. Most people don't. Thomas considered this for a moment. "There's not that much else to do," he said honestly. "No," Duvall agreed. "I imagine not." He asked Thomas what he had been reading. Thomas told him. Duvall asked what Thomas thought of it, not whether he liked it, which is the question adults reflexively ask children about books, but what he actually thought about the specific things that happened in it, and why, and whether the ending was earned or convenient. Thomas, who was not accustomed to being asked this kind of question by someone he had known for less than 2 minutes, answered carefully and at some length. Susan Arden sat in her chair and watched her son have a conversation. What was remarkable was not that Thomas was talking. He was a talkative child under normal circumstances, and 19 days of reduced company had done nothing to diminish this. What was remarkable was the quality of what was happening between her son and the man on the other side of the bed. Duvall was listening with the kind of complete, unhurried attention that is genuinely rare in adults dealing with children, and Thomas, who had always been good at recognizing the difference between being listened to and being managed, had understood this within the first 2 minutes and responded accordingly. He was not performing for a visitor. He was talking to someone. They talked for 45 minutes about the books, about Carthage, Tennessee, and the specific things Thomas missed about it, about what the view from a second-floor hospital window teaches you about a city when you watch the same intersection for 3 weeks, about whether the pigeons that congregated on the ledge across the street were the same birds every day or a rotating population, which was a question Thomas had been turning over for some time, without arriving at a satisfactory answer. Duvall engaged with the pigeon question with the seriousness it apparently deserved. He offered 3 separate theories, each one built on a different set of assumptions about pigeon behavior and territorial range. Thomas countered 2 of them with specific observations he had accumulated over 19 days. The way the bird's pattern of arrival varied with the weather, the fact that the ledge was occupied earlier on cold mornings than warm ones, a particular bird with an asymmetrical wing that Thomas had catalogued as a consistent presence, and therefore felt was strong evidence for at least a partial population of regulars. Duvall listened to this evidence with the attention it deserved, asked 2 clarifying questions, conceded both contested points graciously, and revised his position to account for what Thomas had actually seen, rather than what the theory predicted he should have seen. Thomas, who had been arguing about the pigeons with himself for 19 days, found the experience of arguing about them with someone else unexpectedly satisfying. At no point during the 45 minutes did Duvall tell Thomas who he was. Thomas did not ask. When Duvall finally stood to leave, he shook Thomas's hand, not the abbreviated, careful handshake that adults tend to give sick children, but a real one. The handshake of someone taking leave of a person whose company has been genuinely worth having. "You're a good observer," he said. "That's a more useful thing to be than most people realize." He said goodbye to Susan Arden, who had been sitting in her chair by the window for the past 45 minutes, watching her son be entirely himself with a complete stranger, and who thanked him in a voice that was doing a certain amount of work to stay level. Duvall nodded at her in the way that acknowledges something without requiring it to be said out loud. He thanked Patricia Webb in the hallway. He walked back through the lobby past Carol Simmons at the front desk, who watched him go without saying anything, because there was nothing that adequately covered the situation. His driver, Gerald, was still parked outside. He had been there for 53 minutes. "Sorry about the wait," Duvall said, getting in. "No problem at all," Gerald said. He looked in the rearview mirror for a moment. "Everything okay?" "Fine," Duvall said. There was a kid looking out a window. They drove back to the hotel. Thomas Arden was discharged from Vanderbilt Children's Hospital 8 days later, on a Tuesday morning when the October light was doing something particular with the trees along Medical Center Drive that his mother said was beautiful, and that Thomas noted in passing without being able to disagree. He had spent 27 days total in that room. He knew its dimensions by feel, its sounds by time of day, its light by season. He left it without looking back, which is the right way to leave a room you have lived in long enough to know too well. But he took the questions with him. The ones about the books, the ones about the pigeons, the one about what it means to pay attention to a thing just because it's there. He went home to Carthage, went back to school, and grew up in the unremarkable and fortunate way that children do when the things that nearly went wrong don't. He became, in his adult life, a high school history teacher, a profession that requires, among other things, the particular capacity to pay close attention to people who are not always certain they deserve to be paid attention to. He has told the story of that Thursday afternoon visit many times over the years, always with the same details and always ending the same way. "I still don't know for certain if it was who my mother thinks it was," he says, "but whoever he was, he asked me what I actually thought about a book instead of whether I liked it, and he took the pigeon question seriously. I was 9 years old. Nobody had done either of those things before." He pauses. "It stayed with me." The pigeons, for the record, were different ones. If this story reminds you that the smallest gesture, a car that pulls over, a door that opens, a question asked with genuine curiosity, can be the thing a person carries for the rest of their life, subscribe and tell us in the comments about a moment when a stranger gave you more than they knew. More stories about the real character behind Hollywood's greatest legends are coming every week.